Yeah, well, welcome everybody. Good morning. Really appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be here. I caught the last office hour where Darren Doctor explained a little bit about how Landfire's spatial system digs into what the vegetation is and what were the, remote sensing and other techniques that went into creating that spatial data set. So I'm going to take this one and kind of build on that in this office hour and talk about how do we use some of this data, and my specific application is smoke. So first question for you all is fuel types. What fuel types do you see in this picture here? This is the Forsyth fire near St. George, Utah, and the Pine Valley Mountains. And it was burning earlier this summer. Okay, we got a great variety from Randy, ones that are unknown to me. I know we have a few people. I've seen the list of participants. Okay, so we go. Andrew went straight into the fire behavior fuel types of timber understory. We have grass, sage, pinyon juniper, yep, shrubs. Okay, absolutely. And a pretty quick transition from sagebrush in the foreground to a grassy meadow in the middle, and you can see the fire team is so confident that that grassy meadow is not going to burn that they have set up trailers, porta potties, et cetera, tents in that field in order to house the firefighters and house the support systems that go along with the large wildfire. Cool. And then, yeah, but in the background, we've got quite clearly ready to burn pinyon juniper and probably on those higher peaks, some timber as well. Yeah, great job, you guys. Cool. So good job identifying those fuel types. And then, of course, yeah, you can see how quickly that changes in terms of distance across the landscape of a few hundred meters, and then how significant that is for the fire behavior and also for the smoke. Okay, so moving on here, I'm going to use the term wildland fire a lot. So again, question for you guys to put into the chat. Which one of these is the wildfire and which one of these is the prescribed fire? The term wildland fire is an all-encompassing, holistic term that covers both uh, wildfires and prescribed fires.
So which one is the prescribed, which one's the wildfire?
Yeah, yeah. And so most people are guessing the wildfires on the left and the prescribed fires on the right, but Andrew has picked out a key piece of information. Nice job, Andrew. I see aerial ignition on the left is what he says. And yes, so I'm going to zoom in here. That is a helicopter with a helitorch underneath it. And that is one of the many ignition techniques we use on a prescribed fire. So in fact, this one on the left is a prescribed fire with the goal of aspen restoration in mixed conifer. Yes, assuming this is a trick question. It is a trick question. And if we scroll over here to the right, this is a wildfire. This is the Lion's Head fire near Warm Springs, Oregon. And of course, sometimes the tactics for corralling a wildfire include an ignition operation along a roadway. And so this is a burnout in order to build some containment around the Lion's Head fire in 2020 in Oregon. So, yep, it was a bit of a trick question, but great job, you guys, and especially picking out some of the subtle details. And yeah, the can't always judge a book by its cover. So I'm going to make some points ahead of time and just to kind of set up the talk, and then we'll get into some of the land fire stuff. So I like to say that wildland fires are accelerating. I could look at this chart endlessly. I just think it's fascinating. And, we start in 1983 because that's when we feel pretty comfortable about our reporting systems being up to snuff and capturing, a really a fairly precise number in terms of an accurate number in terms of the acres in the US. So, if you look at this in terms of like, well, when was the last time we had a wildfire season in the US below 2 million acres? Well, 1998, right? Every year since then has been well above that mark. Um, or when did we start having wildfire seasons in the US above, you know, 6 million acres or 8 million acres? Well, all of that has been in the right hand half of this chart. So this season so far, I grabbed this number last week, 4 million acres. I just checked this morning, we're at 4.1 million acres. So not surprising in August that 100,000 acres would burn in a week in US wildfires, but that's what's happened in the last week since I put this slide together. Okay. The other thing I guess I'd say is that um, prescribed fire is also very much having a moment, right? And so, again, we're using that holistic term for wildland fire. You see it in the news, and it's sort of correctly, in my opinion, a go-to solution for reducing the negative impacts of wildfires, right? It's generally supported in a bipartisan political way. It's the interest is there in a way it hasn't been for many years in terms of looking at that as a solution to wildfire challenges. So really appreciate having my career and overlapping with sort of that trends and these fascinating, interesting, and difficult challenges to work with. So second point I'd make is that lots of fire makes a lot of smoke. Um, I believe this is 2021 when the Dixie Fire and a number of other fires in Northern California were sending a lot of smoke, and even fires in Nevada were sending a lot of smoke across the country. And you don't have to look very hard if you look at Worldview during the summer months over the past 20 years to find images that look like this. And then sort of the last thing that ties this together is smoke is very bad for you, right? This is not something I had to search very hard for. If you look at my Google search for wildfire smoke and health risks, all the articles were from the last 24 to 16 hours, right? Like this is just Tuesday in terms of how many new stories come out, right? You could do that any day of the week and there would be new things, and they're finding more and more unfortunate health effects of smoke exposure. It appears to be worse than your sort of run-of-the-mill city particulate matter pollution for a couple of reasons, right? It's very, very small. It comes with a host of other nasties, not just particulate matter. And so, yeah, there's a number of reasons why we want to avoid breathing smoke and sort of what can we even do about it? Reducing our exposure is certainly one thing. Managing our forests and rangelands in responsible ways that mitigate the most severe wildfires is another thing. Cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about, again, why do this. And I just foreshadowed that a little bit, which is, let's figure out good ways to protect ourselves in terms of human health. We'll also talk about how we do this, right? How we quantify wildland fire emissions. And then we'll talk about where land fire fits in. Well, that's my roadmap here for the talk. Okay. Question again for the group. Why with the smoke and emissions? We're quantifying them. We want to understand them. So who would be asking me this question if I'm a fire manager? If releasing less than 2 tons of PM10 per day, pick SMP1. If more, pick SMP2. What kind of person? Who do you think is filling out this form, and who do you think is requiring this form to be submitted? Okay, yeah, state air quality regulator. You guys got it. The Andrews are on it. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to give you guys a harder one. Why do you think they're asking about PM10? And that's a challenge question. So I'm expecting like, oh, Giselle or Melanie or somebody to know the answer to this one. But whether they do or not, that's okay. Yeah, absolutely. So this is a state air quality regulator. If I'm a prescribed fire burn boss, I may have to fill out a form like this, and I may have to understand enough about my prescribed fire to say, well, is it going to be more or less than 2 tons of PM10 per day, right? Okay, Andrew says that's what the Clean Air Act rules were based on. Yeah. So, um, our regulatory system in place around air quality was really created prior to the era of megafires. Remember that chart and things started to take off in the late 90s and early 2000s in terms of wildfire acres? Well, all of the air quality laws were passed and updated, in the 70s and 80s, and very little changes since then. There's just been kind of tweaks around the edges. And yeah, so PM10 was kind of the state of the science at that time. And we didn't get really robust measurements of smaller particulate matter known as PM2.5 until a little bit more recently. And so that's kind of why that holdover is in there. And yep, Giselle, it is in the NACs. And another thing I would say is that it's very hard to change a state smoke management plan. That's what the SMP on this page stands for. Because for a number of reasons that are far beyond what we want to be bothered talking about today. But anyway, a lot of our state smoke management plans are 20 years old and may remain that way. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It could be puddle burns. Yeah.
I have a question, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead,
So
Megan.
how similar are the state smoke management plans like among states? Because I know I used to live in Logan. You know, we used to deal with their inversions, right?
Yeah.
So how similar are they? Do they vary much between states?
Yes. They vary completely. Yeah. It's like um there's well, I don't think I can overstate how variable they are. Some states have very esoteric rules. Some states have a form that probably anybody on this call could figure out just looking at it once and say, okay, yeah, I think I know what I need to do to apply for a prescribed fire permit. So, and some of them are very strict, and some of them are not so strict. So, yeah, and it also changes in terms of potentially within the state, right? We mentioned already in the chat, people have pointed out non-attainment or maintenance areas for specific pollutants may be more stringent. So, yeah, they're extremely variable. That's a great question, Megan. Cool. Okay, the last thing I'd probably point out when we're on this slide here is that like 2 tons of PM10 is not a magic number, right? It doesn't, if you only burn, 1.5 tons of PM10, it doesn't mean you're not going to smoke out a neighborhood or irritate somebody who's sensitive or cause all kinds of smoke problems, right? But, rule of thumb, in this case, this particular state smoke management program has decided, yeah, we can make people do some extra paperwork at that. That's our comfort level for a cutoff of when we really want to dig in and make sure all the ducks are in a row and the day is a good day and the fuel is dry and not going to make too much smoke and the burn boss knows what they're doing, et cetera. So really that's what happens when you hit SMP 1 or 2. If you hit SMP 2, you're going to have some more questions and a harder look will be taken at your project. Cool. Okay. Here's again looping back to what we can do about it. So oftentimes in my job, the question I'm trying to answer is based on what I think will happen tomorrow, how bad will the smoke be and where is it going to go? Okay. And so here are some tools that help me figure out that question, right? We've already looked at LANDFIRE, we've already looked at worldview, which is actually just another snapshot here of worldview, and this is Central Idaho last summer. Um, this is a simulated smoke model that I initiated the day prior to this day that you see on the satellite here on the right. Okay, so this smoke model is called the BlueSky framework, and we'll dig into that a little bit. But you can see it does a pretty good job of suggesting that, hey, actually, on this day, August 31st, you're probably going to see the thickest smoke to the east and south of the Wapiti fire. That's what this diamond here is looking at. And yeah, I was in the middle of that mess too, Andrew. Right. And hey, they did a good job. Like you can see the thickest smoke is indeed in this drainages of the Boise River to the east and south of the Wapiti fire. And the model does a pretty good job of suggesting, hey, it's also going to fill into these long corridors as you get a little further eastern in Idaho towards Salmon and Challis. So cool. This is helping me create a product like this, the smoke outlook. So people can actually take some actionable information and protect their health with it, right? And so Megan will try and get all these links out to everybody. But if you're curious about the Wildland Fire Air Quality Response Program and smoke outlooks and how we do that as air resource advisors, there's a ton of resources for you on that. And yeah, awesome. Thanks for putting that in there, Jason. Cool. So that's kind of another reason of the why in terms of emissions. And then I'll segue here to quantifying them, but also at the same time, we're looking at the why a little bit on this slide here. So we are looking at the EPA's national emissions inventories for 2017 on the left and 2020 on the right. And question for you guys, what sector has the greatest emissions?
Can you ask that question again, Paul?
Yeah, which sector of pollution sectors has the most emissions? And let's say it has the most carbon monoxide emissions. Yeah, all fires. Okay. If you were to go to EPA's tool here and turn on just particulate matter, PM 2.5, all fires would also have the highest bar chart. We're fortunate in that carbon monoxide actually dissipates and really quickly from the ignition source. And so, yes, that's an alarming amount of carbon monoxide, but it doesn't float and land like several states away the same way that particulate matter does. Cool. Depends on the pollutant. Yeah, good point, Gil. Yeah, you're right. Because some of them are more significant, like PM10's primary biggest source is dust in the US. Cool. Okay, so what unit of measurement are we looking at here? Yeah, PM 2.5, and then how do we quantify it? We are measuring them in tons, actually, basically all these pollutants. Yeah, nice job, Kathy. Um, and in this case, millions of tons, right? 10, 20, 30, 40. But in the case of, getting my smoke permit for my prescribed fire, I'm looking at my plus or minus two, right? Cool. So Blue Sky framework will also spit out this information for me. So I can get not just that nice map of where the smoke is going to go, but I can get an understanding of the total tons. And this is what helps me fill out my form. So for this little prescribed fire where I've got a fuel bed of 42, and we'll start talking about fuel beds and land fire here any second. 10 acres, it's going to estimate in the Blue Sky framework using the consume emissions model 1.8 tons of PM10. And so I know, oh, I'm just under the line. So I only am an SMP1 for purposes of filling out that form. Okay, so this is another way in terms of how we do it. Yeah. Okay, so we'll switch gears to talk about fuel characteristic classification system. that fuel bed 42, quaking aspen, Engelmann spruce, that is one of the many fuel beds, probably about 500 for natural vegetation that are in the fuel characteristic classification system. And some folks had mentioned earlier in the call when I talked about what are the fuel types you see in this picture, and a few people mentioned fire behavior fuel types. FCCS is different than fire behavior fuel types. It's designed to answer questions about one, smoke production, also crown fire potential, and a few other things that the fire behavior fuel types aren't necessarily set up to do. So the FCCS for any given fuel bed includes these six strata, right? The canopy, and you can see that with the overstory here in the picture on the right. Shrubs, which you can see a little sagebrush here and a little bit of low juniper in the middle ground there. Non-woody vegetation such as grass, that's in here as well. Woody fuels, we've got a down log on the forest floor in this picture. Litter, lichen, and moss, as well as ground fuels like duff, and that's all in here as well. So we have this mapped for the whole country. Awesome. Thank you, LANDFIRE. So this is where it comes in. And I'll point out a couple things here. So this is the LANDFIRE viewer, and the most recent year for which we have the FCCS, as of last week anyway, I believe is 2023. So you'll see that in your options of LANDFIRE. And you'll kind of skip this vegetation folder. You'll go to the fuel folder if you want to look at the FCCS for your area. And then it's this last option, fuel characteristic classification class. This is near my house, and this gray path is Interstate 80. These are the reservoirs, these other two gray spots. So we basically have kind of this non-burnable or water slash pavement category in the LANDFIRE for FCCS. But yes, indeed, like if I pick this spot on the south side of I-80 going up Parley's Canyon, FCCS fuel bed is 317, big tooth maple forest. That's accurate. I know it from experience. Cool. How did we make this map? Well, if you caught the last LANDFIRE when Darren explained how he made the US 240 vegetation type, if you look, I have now the checkbox is down here, right? So I'm gonna go back. Okay. Checkbox is up here. Forward. Checkbox is down here. These don't line up perfectly, but they line up real close, and essentially they mapped one-to-one the fuel vegetation type to the FCCS fuel beds. Okay. And this one, of course, shows the reservoirs in blue and the roads in black, whereas we go back to FCCS, that, subtle difference there. They just kind of labeled everything non-burnable as gray. But otherwise very similar, and the description of the fuel type is very similar too, right? Rocky Mountain, big tooth maple, ravine, woodland. Yeah, another great apt description of what this is actually like in real life. And I believe these are on a 30-meter resolution now. So very cool. Very detailed, and in my experience, fairly accurate in terms of describing the vegetation correctly. There's some other subtleties we'll get into, shortly in the call, but this is what it looks like under the hood in terms of that big tooth maple forest, right? So an FCCS fuel bed is going to include all this information as a default for a number 317 big tooth maple. And this will pop up in BlueSky Playground when you're using it to try and map out, say, a prescribed fire or a wildfire event and understand what the smoke production will be. Cool. So first, I'm going to do a quick demo of this. So I will sharing that, and then Megan, are you guys now seeing BlueSky Playground?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, fantastic.
Quick question about BlueSky. Is it free? Is this a free application? Okay.
Yeah, it's a free application, and I will throw the link in the chat in a second. Of course, people with good eyesight can just, or maybe you already have it bookmarked, depending on who you are. But for now, just hang off and follow along with me. So let's say I'm going to move this close to me. I'm gonna go here to um, near where I live, and some of the prescribed fires I've been involved with recently have been up in Lambs Canyon. So here's that exact, land fire um, area where we were, and I'm gonna click here. I'm gonna click here in Lambs Canyon, and I'm gonna click update field information based on fire location, and it will think for a minute, and then it will spit out 273. Engelmann spruce, Douglas fir, white fir, ponderosa pine forest. That's great. That's exactly what um, it should be, in my opinion. And we've got fire size 100 acres. I'll leave that at 100 acres. If you want to see what I just showed on the previous slide in terms of what is the fuel loading of this fuel bed 273, here it is by strata. And of course, I may very well have better information about my prescribed fire, right? So I can unlock this and change these numbers. Let's say, and the duff is really not that thick, right? Maybe we already did a broadcast prescribed fire. So I'm going to say it was more like half an inch of duff, and I'm going to reduce that duff loading from 10 tons an acre to 5 tons an acre. Okay. Cool. I can do a few other things, and we don't need to go. This isn't a BlueSky course, so I'm not going to go into absolutely everything that you can do. But moisture level dry, that's probably a safer bet than moisture level wet in terms of Utah, even today when we had a little bit of rain. So then I'll hit run, and it'll spit out my answer for 100 acres. My fuel bed is a custom one based on fuel bed 273. It says that because I changed one of the numbers there. Remember, I changed the fuel loading in the duff. And at 100 acres, I'm going to put out 20 tons of PM10, 15 tons of PM2.5. And there I have my answer. I'm ready to go within, 30 seconds to fill out my smoke management form. I can be transparent with our regulators. I can show that I've done my due diligence for, say, a NEPA document. There's many, many applications for this information. Cool. So here's what we are going to do. I'm going to start up the slideshow again. I will throw this link in the chat for you guys. And I want everybody to try it out themselves. Pick a prescribed fire potential location near you. Click that little button to update the fuels information from the map and see what it comes up with. And then hit run and see how much PM10 it gives you. Now, the last caveat is stop at subway stop number 2. So if I show that, see how where you kind of have this. Yeah, if everybody tries to do a dispersion, it will probably break the server. So that's why I said stop at subway stop number 2. We're going to test them. I'm pretty sure they can handle all of us doing an emission scenario. But, oh yeah, thanks, Meg. You got it as well. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead and do it yourself, you guys, and raise your hand if you have any questions, if there's something you don't understand.
Paul, I have a question. Does this just automatically pull in LANDFIRE in the back end? So
Yeah,
it'll pull in the most current products.
yeah. Okay, so two-part answer. Yes, it automatically pulls in LANDFIRE in the back end. However, not necessarily the most current products. They have to do some work with the BlueSky program every time LANDFIRE is updated to bring that in there. Yeah. So
Okay.
they're not pinging your API each time somebody moves the dot on the map. They have their own locally hosted version of the LANDFIRE FCCS map.
Okay, and then I have another question. So how many times is it updated a year? Because we release by geo area. So is it once a year that it's updated or every time we have a release?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's probably every time they have time to update it.
Okay.
It's probably the correct answer there, Megan. I reached out to a few people in the Blue Sky group, which is called the Air Fire Research Team, which is a kind of a partnership between the University of Washington and U.S. Forest Service's Pacific Northwest Research Station. And of course, they have, yeah, probably team members with other affiliations as well, besides just UW and the Forest Service. And they said, I mean, in essence, yes, they're aware of how often Landfire updates, like, and they just don't necessarily have the capacity to ingest that information every time you guys push an update, but they do their best. I guess
Makes
that's the
sense.
best way to put it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Has anybody got an answer? Did you make it to stop two? Does anybody have an output for their PM10 on their simulated prescribed fire near them? Yeah, Andrew. Okay. 0.22, Melanie, 2.9. And are you guys, did everybody do 15 acres? Cool. Yeah. Um, and that's a reason I picked 15 acres. You're often that one, depending on the fuel type, is going to be well above 2 tons, and it'll kick you into that higher category of the smoke management plan for that state anyway. Other states might have a different threshold or cutoff. Others, and some states may not even ask, but most of them do. And then for some fuel types, you'll be well below that 2 tons, or yeah, you'll be right near it. Cool. Yeah, and it sounds like people came up with all sorts of different fuel beds. Yeah, if you guys remember, also, why don't you put in the chat what FCCS fuel bed you ended up with? I see we have Western juniper, invaded sagebrush. Um, what other fuel beds did people end up using for their run? Chestnut oak. All right. That takes me back to my Virginia Tech days, Melanie. A whole lot of chestnut oak on Rocky Top mountains in Southwest Virginia. Doug fir, oak savanna, cool Pacific ponderosa pine. Yep. Fir, hemlock, cedar. Bonnie, you must be in the Great Lakes area then. Red pine. Cool. Awesome, you guys. Well, cool. It sounds like a ton of people have made it work and we didn't break the server or anything. So that's fantastic. I will point out, I'll show one more thing. So if you have that's again, this isn't a BlueSky Playground course, but if I have, let's say I actually want to include multiple fuel types or multiple fuel beds, that can be done, right? Let's say I'm burning both the south aspects and the north aspects in this area here. So I can go into my spot and I can actually draw a polygon. And maybe this is going to be a little more than 15 acres, but let's go with that. And then I'll update my fuels information. And now I have more than one fuel bed, right? It is both Engelmann spruce on the north aspect where it's shady and mountain mahogany on the south aspect. And I can, if I want to go to like 50-50 for that, I can do that. So BlueSky Playground does have this functionality where you include under the expert mode multiple fuel beds. But again, we'll move on because that's not exactly why we're here today. I wanted to show that that's a possibility, but that's not the key goal. What I really want to do is just think about this conceptually because I know we have a ton of awesome folks in the group here. Can you think of some watchouts here? Can you think of some things that Landfire may not know? Or can you think of some ways to improve an emission estimate beyond what the default assumptions were in FCCS/Landfire? So yeah, but feel free to raise your hand if you got an answer to any of these bullets. I don't know if you're able to come off mute, but tell us more about what you popped in the chat there.
Yeah, thanks. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a wildfire person, an ecologist with the Nature Conservancy's Landfire team, but I've been on some field tours where fire managers have pointed out this issue of having balsam fir under aspens. So you have this extremely flammable or potentially extremely flammable coniferous tree under deciduous, which can really change the work that they do. I'm sure like folks like Shelby Majors and others in the Great Lakes can add to this. But this one's an interesting to me, and I'm not sure that Landfire always is able to capture that being in the mid and understory. But I'd love to hear folks chime in on that one.
Yeah, any thoughts in the group? a couple things come to mind when you say that, Randy. One is, um, the way they mapped the FCCS fuel beds is sort of a one-to-one with those vegetation categories, right? And the way they mapped those
Mm.
vegetation categories was mostly satellite data, like also some ground truthing, but mostly satellite data. Well, yeah, it's pretty hard to see through the canopy with the satellite image. Yeah, so absolutely, you're going to get that. Um, yeah, totally agree
I
with you.
also I also know that folks on the ground know how to tweak these models to make them represent their situation better. So it looked like you were hinting at that in part of your demo. You could do some work in the tool to, get reasonable runs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have a slide on that one. Let's go to, yep, fuel loading. Okay. Obviously, one acre is different from the next, even if you have the same, if even if you're mapped to the same FCCS fuel bed, right? There's a colossal amount of variability. You can actually these days get a lot of quick and actionable information without a ton of effort. So we'll get this link in the chat. This is yeah, thanks, Megan. This is Heather Heward's video explaining how to do a very quick fuel loading survey using a 1 meter frame. And you can see the two people on the left. And then also, there's all sorts of really cool other ways to do this with high technology approaches too. So you can see some LiDAR stuff on the right hand. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'm seeing a bunch of other great stuff in the chat. Inga, yeah, go ahead and unmute if you're able and tell us more about your notion of disturbances. And I think Melanie hit on that as well.
So yeah, I mean, I think, there there are changes to FCCS loadings based on the disturbances that LANDFIRE maps. So, those are somewhat accounted for, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
So anything that we map, and that includes the hurricane, any fires, anything that we map, that will change the FCCS amounts. I believe I would probably need some confirmation on that. But the other thing that I'm curious about is, yeah, how do you go from an EVT cover and height to 6 strata of loading, right? Like I never quite understood how that happened, and I think it's mainly like just from the literature, but I guess, do you have any further information on that you could share?
yeah. I completely agree with you. It's very hard to go from, yeah, the vegetation type to something that includes those 6 strata that are all key inputs in how the fire will behave and how much emissions it will make. I think literature and some number of field plots, and then another tool that was used is the digital photo series. I know when sort of lining up the veg types and the FCCS. So yeah, great question. Probably not as robust as it could be. Apologize that my answer is not as definitive as it could be because yeah, the people to ask would be like the names that come to mind are Roger Ottmar and Susan Pritchard. Both
Yeah, and I should probably know more about it. Actually,
yeah,
Sarah Harrison might know some, but
yeah, yep, absolutely. But no, you're getting at, how responsive is Landfire to changes over time, right? We've got this is a Landfire disturbance map product that shows what are some recent changes. So yeah, they did a good job picking up these fires, but hey, just last year we had the Fish Creek and Pack Trail fires also in this part of Wyoming, and they're almost certainly not reflected yet in the BlueSky Playground because, as Megan mentioned, maybe their refresh rate isn't quite as fast as land fires. And so, yeah, especially when you're using a tool like BlueSky, which is a derivative product and doesn't always keep up to speed. And then, of course, LANDFIRE is still behind reality by a certain number of months as well. So, yep, that's
Yeah,
definitely.
is that something that is, because we do FCCS every 2 years, is that something that should change? Do we need to do it more often? Would it even be ingested if we did it more often, I guess?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, good point. I think part of it is, if I'm at the scale of a prescribed fire on the order of 10 to 1,000 acres, generally, right? Somewhere in the tens or hundreds, and occasionally as big as 1,000 acres for a prescribed fire. I am probably familiar enough with that landscape to know, right? Okay, is what the default and land fire going to be accurate, or do I need to make my own changes? So at least we have that going for us as an operational type person. Okay, what else do we have in the chat that we might want to explore? Okay, disturbances should be somewhat accounted for. Yep. Yep, the canopy issues, mechanical treatments. Yep, historical prescribed burns. Okay, cool. I think people have done a ton of, it might not end up being 100% burned, right? And does consume take this into account? Yeah, anything else you want to add on that, Gil? I think that's a great point.
Oh, nothing more. Just that I'm just thinking of things that we do when our state collects prescribed burn information with a certified burner program when they're trying to enhance reporting. And one of the things that was, how much did you actually successfully burn in your prescribed burn?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if I bring back up the BlueSky and, it's both sort of manual as an option, Gil. I can change the consumption here from, 50% of shrubs to 10% of shrubs, and that will
Oh, I
change my
see.
answer.
Okay,
Yeah.
you got it.
Yeah, and I can also but if all I do is go from dry to wet, that will also reduce the amount burned and therefore the quantity thing. So, yep. Yeah, but great point there. Cool. Let me see, back to the slideshow here. So weather is another one, right? That is going to be really significant. And the BlueSky Playground doesn't ask you for a wind speed, but yeah, there's going to be a total difference in consumption on a calm day versus a windy day. Moisture is in there. You can tweak those numbers yourself in BlueSky, like we just showed, right? And here's a conifer stem on the left burning in the spring. You can see the green grass in the foreground and what kind of fire behavior you get. And then here's a conifer stand, very similar fuel type. A couple months later, once things have dried out, and you can see the difference in obviously the smoke production and lots of other things that are important. Cool. Let's see. Okay, and then the last thing I'd note is that, we have this new 30-meter data. Here's a side-by-side of the Bridger Teton National Forest between old school 1 kilometer data and new school 30-meter data. Boy, it's really precise, right? But the accuracy is still, we're still applying this method nationally with a whole lot of interpretation of satellite information, interpolation between actual ground truth plots. And so, yeah, don't take any of this to be gospel, I guess, would be one of my last warnings and watch outs. Oh, Sarah, awesome. Thank you for chiming in on Inga's questions. Sorry, I'm a little behind on reading the chat. So they will change in relation to disturbance type, severity, and time since disturbance. Fantastic. I will go to, I thought I had a final conclusionary slide. Oh yeah, it's backwards. Okay. And then here's my takeaways for you guys. One would be smoke is bad for you. There's lots of it. There will be more of it in the future, and we can reduce our exposure individually and collectively. So one of the concepts that helps us do this is something we call smoke readiness, right? Just as communities, especially around the Western US, have really done a lot of work for pre-fire planning in terms of evacuation plans, making sure people understand what the different evacuation categories are, how to notify people, what, packing a go bag. Like there's a lot of public service announcements around fire readiness. Well, we're starting to build some momentum in terms of that around smoke readiness, right? Like, know where your nearest air quality monitors or sensors are. You can even buy one yourself. Low-cost sensors are in the $200 or $300 range for some of them, as inexpensive as that. Um, you know, uh, know how to keep the air quality in your house as good as possible, right? Whether that be closing the windows, putting the nicest filter that your HVAC system can take on, or having extra air filters in the rooms where you spend the most time, etc. So there's a ton of room for us, even in a smoky future, to make great decisions that protect our health as best as possible. Okay, second takeaway for me, LANDFIRE and the FCCS are key tools to understanding that nexus of wildland fire and air quality. And then probably the biggest one is just how many people's work went into setting that up. None of that was my work, right? I'm just a user of this information, and it really takes a village to make all these things go, right? I mentioned some research colleagues, folks in the operations side, air quality regulators came up. Communities have to want to engage in terms of smoke readiness, and we're seeing that more and more because those events can be really unpleasant. The long-term smoky event in your valley is really unpleasant and unfortunate, and something you want to try to address in terms of letting people make the best decisions they can. And of course, the public health community. And I didn't fuzz that phone number out because that's actually my phone number, so no big deal. This picture is south of Moab, Utah, near Monticello. And yeah, just again, incredibly fortunate to have such an awesome career and work in such a fascinating and dynamic part of public land management that we have. And so yeah, I got to set these instruments up, and you can see a little smoke down below in the canyon, and we're just monitoring this prescribed fire. It's a pile burn in this case, to see what the effects are. So with that, I'd say thanks. And yeah, I guess we have 4 minutes left. So if anybody has any other.
Yeah, thanks so much for this. Really great. I loved your slides, by the way, just really clean and easy to follow. So really appreciate that. Watching LinkedIn, trying to track some of the literature, things are changing so quickly. New tools and data sets are popping up all the time. And I'm wondering if there are any that you're tracking or especially interested in that we with LANDFIRE should be tracking as well, in the fuels, air quality, smoke management kind of world. It's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah. Yeah, good question, Randy. There's a couple private satellite efforts that are getting off the ground. Maybe you've heard of FireSat, and one of the tools is actually already sort of ready in the commercial space, and it's called Aura something other. I can't recall the name, but yeah, there's a couple private satellite systems that are coming online that are in the polar orbiting, right? So rapidly refreshing, but also, maybe not, down to the minute, but, an overpass every day or so, or maybe more often than that, and then pretty high resolution. So that would be something of interest. Yeah, great question. What else is out there? There's so much stuff out there.
It's a big question.
It's almost impossible to keep track of it all. I know in the smoke space, the EPA does a great job of rolling up this kind of stuff. And so I always look to my colleague there, Erin McTeague. She puts out like a monthly email bulletin, and Megan has her email. And it's basically like, hey, here's the 14 different webinars on smoke and fire and air quality that you can tune into this month, you guys. And so she puts out an email like that every month, which is really helpful for me. Let me think. I'll probably just stop at those two, but yeah, great question, Randy. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul.
Yeah.